In this video, we'll be going over why Soul Charge and Giant Trunade are currently banned in the competitive format. First, let's take a look at Soul Charge. Soul Charge was released in 2014 and immediately saw a ton of competitive success, and was met with a lot of head scratching because it was pretty obvious this card was overpowered from inception. What it does is allow you to target any number of monsters in your graveyard and special summon them. But if you do this, you lose 1,000 life points for each monster special summoned by its effect. And you cannot conduct your battle phase that turn, plus it's a hard once per turn, so you can't spam multiple copies. So what was such a head scratcher about this is that at the same time, Monster Reborn was still limited to 1 copy per deck, a distinction it still holds to this day, because being able to special summon 1 monster from your graveyard without any restrictions to the card is kind of really good in just about every deck. Of course, not every deck wants to special summon monsters from the graveyard, but a vast majority of them do, which is why if there's any card that allows you to special summon monsters from the graveyard too easily, they usually have a whole bunch of heavy restrictions to them, like Rekindling as a pretty classic example. Rekindling also allows you to special summon as many monsters from your graveyard as you want, except only targets that are of the fire attribute and have exactly 200 defense. Granted, a lot of fire monsters have exactly 200 defense, but it is a restriction to that crazy effect. And it's why even Rekindling saw some time on the ban list. And at the same time Soul Charge came out, we did have 2 other mass summoning cards banned. That being Return from a Different Dimension and Dimension Fusion. Dimension Fusion allowed both players to special summon as many of the remove from play monsters as possible at only a 2,000 life point cost, and is an incredibly powerful card. Return from the Different Dimension was a little bit weaker. It requires you to pay half your life points in order to special summon as many of your banished cards as possible, but all of those cards are banished during the end phase, and it's a trap card, so you had to wait a turn before you could use it. And again, all of these cards existed before Soul Charge came out, and some of them were even banned at the time that it came out. So it's pretty easy to see why everyone was so surprised to see a card like Soul Charge being released in 2014. It was obviously good, and saw all kinds of competitive play. So, what exactly is so obviously overpowered about Soul Charge? Well, being able to special summon a monster from the graveyard on a spell card is inherently powerful, which is why cards like Monster Reborn and World Legacy Succession constantly see competitive play, and are both limited in being either limited on the ban list, or just a hard once per turn. There are some monsters which gain effects when they're special summoned and don't have once per turn on their effects, like Elemental Hero Stratos. So, cards like Stratos gain all kinds of advantage if they're able to be special summoned as many times as you can per turn. Although there aren't a lot of cards like Stratos in the game, and usually special summoning from the graveyard is just a way to extend combos, since most cards that have really good effects do not have the ability to special summon themselves. For example, let's use Predaplant Orpheus Scorpio. This is a card which has the effect where you can send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard to special summon a Predaplant monster from your deck. This is almost always used in order to special summon Predaplant Darling Tonia Cobra, which, when special summoned, allows you to add a fusion spell card from your deck to your hand. So if you just add a card like Instant Fusion, use that immediately, get a fusion monster in the field, you basically get 3 monsters on the field for 1 summon of a Predaplant Orpheus Scorpio. However, Predaplant Orpheus Scorpio cannot special summon itself, so bringing this card out would either require your normal summon, or using other cards to special summon it from somewhere else. If this card was simply ditched to the graveyard through some kind of discard effect, like just Dark World Dealings to keep it simple, then being able to special summon it from the graveyard could be paramount to getting 3 extra cards on the field thanks to its combo. Getting an extra Stratos on the field is always paramount to a +1 in card advantage. And that's kind of the power of cards that allow you to special summon other cards. A lot of cards are kind of balanced around requiring your normal summon, or requiring specific niche resources in order to bring it out multiple times. Purely generic support that allows you to special summon cards is pretty rare, and the really good ones are always banned, like Last Will or Summon Sorceress. So being able to special summon a single card from a location is quite good. It becomes a huge problem once you add multiples into it. For example, say you're behind in card advantage, your opponent managed to destroy your entire field and even looped all the cards out of your hand. You draw 1 card and it's Soul Charge, and you can immediately come back pretty easily because you just recur all of your lost advantage, assuming you had the required life points to get those cards out. Example 2, you're in the middle of a combo and your opponent activates a hand trap to stop you. Maybe something like Nibiru the Primal Being and destroys all your cards. You just Soul Charge in order to bring them all back and continue the combos like nothing happened. Example 3, you're going through a Goki Extra link and run out of cards in order to finish the full U link, and you only have a measly 1 negate on the field. Use Soul Charge to bring all of your extenders back and complete your unbreakable board. Example 4, you're trying to set up an unbreakable board of monsters, and you just messed something up because you miscounted how many cards you had in the graveyard, or how many you had on the field for a specific link summon. You just use Soul Charge to bring all your cards back and it doesn't matter. Basically, there isn't really an example in which this card isn't super useful. It's a 1-card win essentially. That's great as a comeback card, or just something that helps you extend your combos like crazy. There's almost no downside to it. Giving up your battle phase is kind of laughable for the amount of advantage it generates, and life points don't really mean anything as shown by how popular the Solemn cards are, as having low life points doesn't mean anything if you win the game anyway. And there isn't really a specific deck that this card breaks, it's just good in majority of them, and even better with certain cards that have excellent effects on special summons. So it was kind of surprising that the card stayed unbanned all the way until January 2019, where it was finally placed on the ban list and no one was surprised. So, can Soul Charge be unbanned anytime soon? Seeing as it was banned 2 years ago? Probably not. Also, seeing as the effect was kind of broken as soon as it came out? Still probably not. Now, there are super powerful cards in the game that allow you to win in 1 turn essentially, like resolving a Nibiru the Primal Being or even an evenly matched against certain decks. But those cards aren't also used as extenders to create unbreakable boards. It's basically a 1-card win condition that isn't really conditional in how it wins you in 1 turn. If you draw into a Soul Charge, it's really hard to lose at that point, unless your opponent is able to successfully negate it or something. How could Soul Charge be fixed to be unbanned? Well, a big problem with this card is just using it to go into a whole bunch of extra deck plays. So, if it had the restriction where you can't special summon from the extra deck during the turn to use its effect, it would still be very powerful but not ridiculously broken like it is currently. It would still probably see play even if it had all the other restrictions in it in addition to the extra deck lockout, but I think that would probably be good enough. A lot of cards that allow you to special summon more than 1 card in 1 turn are almost always broken because of going into extra deck monsters. But if given this restriction, it would just be a really good comeback tool, which is fine in my opinion. Next, let's go over Giant Trunade. This is a normal spell card which simply has the effect to return all spell and trap cards on the field to the hand. So the obvious best use of this card is to return all of your opponent's spell and traps to the hand in order to push for game. That way you don't have to worry about negating your summons or something with a Solemn Warning, or destroying all your cards in the battle phase with something like Mirror Force. And since its effect doesn't destroy, it allows you to bypass a lot of normal failsafes that a lot of protections have for back row, because there's almost nothing that protects your spell and trap cards from being bounced. However, funny enough, the big reason why this card is banned is because of its ability to return your cards as well. More specifically, your face-up cards. They do have another card in the game called Hey Trunade, which simply returns all set spell and trap cards to the hand. It's basically the same exact effect, except it doesn't affect any face-up cards. And Hey Trunade is currently unlimited in the game with no restrictions, and only occasionally sees competitive play. It is, however, semi-limited over in Duel Links because that effect is actually pretty strong in that version of the game. So, let's go over why the ability to return face-up spell and traps to your hand is considered overpowered enough to ban this card, as this card has been banned for a long time, first hitting its ban status in September of 2011. So, one of its more famous examples is its interaction with Premature Burial. Premature Burial is a banned equip spell card which allows you to special summon any monster from your graveyard at the cost of 800 life points, and then attaches this card to that monster. You can then use Giant Trunade in order to return that card to your hand in order to use it again to special summon a second card. Seeing as this combo was considered really good, you can kind of see extra why Soul Charge is banned as well. However, in the act of returning this card to your hand, you're also getting rid of all of your opponent's spell and trap cards, so you get a nice little benefit on top of it. A probably better example, say you have a floodgate out, like Skill Drain, Vanity's Emptiness, or There Can Be Only One, and you want to be actually able to use your cards during your turn. Giant Trunade will allow you to return those cards to your hand, that way you can just use them again as soon as you're done with your combos, while also getting rid of your opponent's back row in the process. You see, with other banned cards like Heavy Storm, you'd be able to turn off your floodgates for a turn as well, while getting rid of your opponent's back row, but you would lose those floodgates in the process. And that's strong enough where Heavy Storm is kind of banned for that reason. But with Giant Trunade, you get those cards back, and then can just use them again. You get the excellent effect of turning off your floodgates for a turn while not losing them like you would with Heavy Storm. And that's kind of the real power of Giant Trunade, being able to turn off your floodgates for one turn and then just have them again. It is also super useful for face-up effects that are soft once per turns that you can return to your hand, like Code A Ancient Ruins or Predaponics. Or just return continuous spell cards to your hand that you would normally only use once but have a hard once per turns, like World Legacy Guard Dragon or Fire Formation Tenki. Or even the plethora of field spell cards that allow you to search an activation, like Trickstar Lightstage or Union Hanger. There's just a lot of really good cards that you would love to be able to reuse those effects because you either place them during a previous turn, and the card was balanced under the notion that you wouldn't be able to activate it again, or it just has a soft once per turn, like Code A Ancient Ruins, and can special summon cards from the graveyard. And one last thing I forgot to mention, probably the biggest reason, is that it allows you to return Pendulum Scales, Union cards, and even Crystal Beast monsters to your hand. One of the reasons Pendulum decks love to destroy their own scales so much is to clear up their Pendulum zones to use more of their effects. But Giant Trunade would allow you to clear them up easier and reuse certain effects immediately, like Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer. And of course, using it with a full field of Unions or Crystal Beasts is like adding 4 monsters to your hand, while, also clearing your opponent's back row. So for Giant Trunade, it is all kinds of powerful with its bouncing that it's kind of hard to tell which one of them is the most broken. Is it more broken to turn off your floodgates for a turn, or to return Pendulum Scales to your hand, or one of the many other uses I talked about? So, could Giant Trunade be unbanned? Currently, that's still probably a no. Floodgates are still strong, even if a lot of the really strong ones are banned, like Vanity's Emptiness. But even with the ones we still have access to, like Skill Drain, or There Can Be Only One, or even Mystic Mind to an extent, it would still be a huge benefit to be able to return those cards to your hand for a turn, while also getting rid of your opponent's back row. And since they released a retrain in the form of Hey Trunade, they have less reason to actually unban the card, because they already released a fairer version of it, which kind of accomplishes the same goal as the original. Originally, it was supposed to be balanced by the fact that it also returned your own cards to your hand, and was generally thought as being the worst version of Harpy's Feather Duster. Although nowadays, Harpy's Feather Duster is off the ban list at 1, and Hey Trunade was given a weaker version so they wouldn't have to release it. So how can they fix the card in order to unban it? While ignoring its retrain that already did this, if we were trying to fix this card while also allowing it to affect face-up spell and traps, it would have to have a restriction like Vulcan the Divine, which is a level 6 synchro monster that has the effect to return one face-up card on both players' field to the hand. However, it adds a restriction to those cards returned to your hand, where you can't activate that card or effects of the card with the same name as those cards for the rest of the turn. But this wouldn't be enough, because it wouldn't solve the problem of resetting floodgates. So it would need to have some other restriction, like you couldn't set the card the turn you return to your hand either. This would stop you from reusing soft once per turn card effects like Code A Ancient Ruins or Luster Pendulum the Draco Slayer, and it would stop you from setting a floodgate to be used as soon as your opponent's turn starts, like Skill Drain. And since Giant Trunade is spell speed 1, this isn't really a problem because you'll just be using it during your turn anyway, and your opponent will be able to use their cards as soon as their turn starts. But this would still make the ability to return your floodgates to your hand good, because it doesn't solve the problem of turning off your floodgates after using them. So instead of making it so you can't set cards that were returned to your hand during the turn, you could just say it doesn't return face-up trap cards at all, and still give it the clause where you can't activate any cards returned to your hand in this way for the rest of the turn. With the restriction of not being able to use the cards that were returned to your hand or being able to set them, that would probably help the card no longer being super good, but would still allow you to use non-destruction removal of all your opponent's face-up cards as well, which is still pretty strong. It still allows you to turn off your floodgates, so unless you get super restricted with what you can return to your hand, the best fix is just to not fix it at all, and allow Hey Trunade to just be its replacement. Alright, and that's the video. Make sure you watch the playlist on all the other banned cards. Also, subscribe or whatever.